December 1886, Judith Basin, Montana Territory. The winter of 86-87 would be remembered as the worst in frontier history, temperatures dropping to 40 below, snow measured in feet rather than inches. But rancher Thomas Brennan faced something worse than weather. His cattle were dying, not from cold or starvation, but from something that killed with precision and purpose. When 40 head were slaughtered in a single night, torn apart, and arranged in patterns that made no sense, Brennan and his men realized they weren't dealing with wolves or rustlers. They were dealing with something that had been hunting these plains long before white men brought their herds. Subscribe now for more true historical horror accounts. My name is Thomas Brennan, and I ran the Double B Ranch in the Judith Basin for 11 years before the winter that ended everything. I came to Montana Territory in 1875 with 300 head of cattle, a wife named Catherine, and enough ambition to think I could carve a life from land that had belonged to the Blackfeet and Crow for centuries before I was born. By December 1886, I had built something substantial, 2,000 head, grazing across 15,000 acres, a main house of milled lumber instead of logs, bunk houses for 12 hands, and a reputation as one of the more successful ranchers in the basin. We'd survived the droughts, prairie fires, and the occasional raid by desperate men. I thought I'd seen everything the frontier could throw at a man. I was catastrophically wrong. The winter announced itself early that year. Snow came in November, heavy and persistent, building drifts that isolated ranches for days at a time. By early December, the temperature had dropped to levels I'd never experienced. 20 below, 30 below, so cold that coffee froze in the cup if you left it outside for more than a few minutes. The cattle suffered. Range cattle weren't bred for this kind of cold. They clustered together for warmth, broke through ice to reach water, and slowly began to weaken. We lost a few head every week to exposure, which was expected. Natural attrition in a bad winter. What happened on December 18th was not natural attrition. I was in the barn checking on the horses when my foreman, a Texan named Jack Coulter, came running through snow that reached his knees. His face was the colour of old canvas. "Boss, you need to come see the south pasture, now." We rode out together, pushing through drifts, the wind cutting through our coats like broken glass. The sun was barely up, the sky a pale grey that promised more snow. When we reached the ridge overlooking the south pasture, I pulled my horse to a stop and just stared. 12 cattle lay dead in the snow, not scattered naturally, not huddled together the way animals freeze, but arranged, laid out in 2 parallel lines, 6 animals to a line, their bodies positioned with a precision that made my skin crawl. We rode down for a closer look. The cattle had been killed, violently, throats torn open, rib cages crushed, some of them nearly torn in half. But there was no blood in the snow around them, none, as if they'd been drained before being deposited here. Jack dismounted, examining the nearest carcass with his rifle ready. He was 35, had fought in the Indian Wars, and didn't scare easily, but his hands were shaking. "Boss, look at the necks, look at the bite pattern." I looked. The throat wounds were massive, far too large for wolves. The jaw that made these marks would have to be, I couldn't even estimate, bigger than anything that lived on these plains. "Grizzly," I suggested, knowing it was wrong even as I said it. "Grizzlies are hibernating, and they don't arrange their kills like this." He gestured at the parallel lines. "This is deliberate. Something wanted us to see this." We spent the next hour searching for tracks. Found nothing. The ground was frozen hard as iron beneath 6 inches of powder snow, and the wind had erased any prints that might have existed. Whatever had done this had left no trace. I reported the loss in my ledger that night. 12 head, cause unknown. Possible predator attack. I didn't mention the arrangement, or the missing blood, or the wrongness of the bite marks. Writing it down would make it real, and I wasn't ready for that. Catherine saw my face across the dinner table. "What happened out there?" "Lost some cattle, bad winter." She studied me with eyes that had learned to read men in 11 years of frontier marriage. There's something you're not saying. There was a lot I wasn't saying. But that night, I told her about the parallel lines, about the missing blood. She listened without interrupting, her face growing pale. The Blackfeet have stories, she said quietly. She'd learned some of their language from a woman who did washing for the ranch. About something that hunts in the deep winter. They call it the Wendigo, a spirit of hunger that grows larger the more it consumes. Indian superstition. Maybe, but 12 cattle don't arrange themselves, and you said there was no blood. I had no answer for that. The second kill happened 3 nights later. This time it was 8 head in the eastern pasture, arranged in a circle, all facing inward as if they'd been forced to watch something at the centre before they died. Jack found them at dawn. The other hands were starting to talk, starting to look at the tree line with expressions I didn't like. Men who face unknowable threats either run or turn on each other, and I couldn't afford either. I called a meeting in the main bunkhouse that evening. All 12 hands present, plus Jack and myself. The stove burned hot, but the room felt cold. "We've got a predator problem," I said, keeping my voice level. "Something big, probably a rogue grizzly that didn't hibernate properly. It's killing stock and we're going to deal with it." "Grizzlies don't do that." This from Samuel Redding, one of my older hands. He'd been in the basin since before I arrived. "I've seen grizzly kills, this ain't that." "Then what is it?" I asked. The room went quiet. Finally, a young hand named Peter spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. "My grandmother was Crow. She told me about the winter of 1843. Said something came down from the mountains during the coldest months. Something that walked upright and killed everything it found. The tribes left the basin entirely until spring, and when they came back, they found whole buffalo herds dead and frozen." "Old stories," I said. "Maybe. But," she said, "it only comes in the worst winters, when the cold is deepest, when the hunger is greatest." He looked around the room. "This is the worst winter in 40 years, maybe longer." Jack cut in before panic could spread. "Stories don't help us. We need a plan. Boss?" I laid it out. We'd organise armed patrols, 2 men on horseback, rotating through the night. Anyone sees anything unusual, they fire 3 shots and ride for the ranch. We'd keep the herd closer to the buildings, easier to defend. And we'd maintain watchfires on the perimeter. It was a good plan. It should have worked. On the night of December 23rd, we lost 40 head. I was on watch with Jack when it happened. We were manning the south perimeter, keeping a fire burning, our rifles loaded and ready. The night was brutally cold. The thermometer at the ranch house read 37 below. Our breath froze in clouds that hung in the still air. Around midnight, the temperature dropped further, not gradually, but suddenly, like someone had opened a door to someplace even colder. The fire guttered and went low despite plenty of fuel, and the silence became absolute. "You feel that?" Jack whispered. I felt it. A pressure in the air, a sense of presence, something massive moving through the darkness beyond our firelight. Then we heard the cattle, not panicked lowing, not the sounds of animals fleeing, screaming. Cattle don't scream like that, but these did. High-pitched, almost human, the sound of pure terror. We mounted and rode toward the noise, rifles ready. The screaming cut off abruptly, all at once like a door slamming. When we reached the main herd, we found carnage. 40 cattle lay dead. Not scattered, not randomly killed. They'd been arranged in concentric circles, 3 rings of death, with something gouged into the frozen earth at the centre. Symbols or letters or something I couldn't read in the darkness. And standing at the edge of the killing ground, barely visible in the moonlight, was a shape. It stood upright, easily 10 feet tall, maybe more. The body was emaciated, ribs visible even from a distance, limbs too long and jointed wrong. The head was elongated, almost skull-like, with antlers or horns that branched against the stars. It looked at us. I felt its gaze, cold and intelligent and hungry. So hungry. Jack fired. The rifle shot echoed across the frozen basin. I saw the bullet strike, saw the creature jerk backward, but it didn't fall. It opened its mouth, and the sound that came out was like wind through a canyon, like ice cracking, like the voice of winter itself. Then it was gone. Not running, just gone, as if it had stepped sideways out of reality. We found tracks this time. They led away from the killing ground toward the Little Belt Mountains, massive prints in the snow, four-toed, with claw marks extending a foot beyond each toe. The stride was impossibly wide, 15 feet between prints. Jack measured them while I stood guard, my rifle trembling in my hands. "This ain't real," he said. "It can't be real." But it was real. The dead cattle were real. The tracks were real. The thing we'd seen was real. We followed the trail for 2 hours before losing it in rocky terrain where the wind had scoured the snow away. But before we lost it, we found something else. A cave opening, partially hidden by deadfall and ice. The tracks led directly to it, and from inside came a smell, rot and old death, and something underneath that. Something sweet and wrong, like flowers growing in a graveyard. "We need more men," Jack said. "More guns. We can't take that thing with just the two of us." He was right. We rode back to the ranch as dawn broke over the basin, the light flat and grey and offering no warmth. I called everyone together and told them what we'd seen. Half the men wanted to leave immediately. The other half were too frozen with fear to make any decision. Catherine stood in the doorway of the main house, listening, her face set. "We can't leave," I said. "The passes are snowed in. We'd die trying to reach Fort Benton. We have to deal with this here." "Deal with what?" Samuel demanded. "You saw it. We can't kill something like that." "The Crow killed it," Peter said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. "My grandmother said they killed it in the winter of 1843. Drove it back into the mountains with fire and numbers. It can be hurt. It can be fought." "How?" I asked. "With everything we have." "We spent Christmas Day preparing. Gathered every rifle, every pistol, every shotgun on the ranch. Made torches from fence posts soaked in kerosene. Loaded 2 wagons with firewood and lamp oil. If we were going to that cave, we were going in force and in light. I won't lie and say the men were brave. Most were terrified, but they stayed. Whether from loyalty or lack of options, or simple stubborn frontier pride, they stayed. We rode out December 26th at dawn, 14 men armed and determined. The tracks were still visible, though new snow had begun to fill them in. The wind picked up as we approached the mountains, howling through ravines with a sound like voices. The cave mouth was larger than I remembered, a dark wound in the mountainside. The smell hit us from 50 yards away, strong enough to make several men gag. We lit the torches, the flames burned bright in the morning darkness, pushing back shadows. I took point with Jack. Beside me, the rest of the men spreading out in a line. "Anyone wants to turn back, now's the time," I said. "No judgment." Nobody moved. We entered the cave. The passage led downward at a gentle slope, widening as it went. The walls were smooth, not natural, carved or worn by something moving through repeatedly over centuries. Our torchlight revealed scratch marks, deep gouges in solid rock. The smell grew stronger, and somewhere ahead we heard breathing, slow, deep, rhythmic, the sound of something massive in sleep. The passage opened into a chamber. Our torches couldn't reach the ceiling, couldn't illuminate the full space, but we saw enough. Bones, hundreds of them, thousands, buffalo, deer, elk, and others. Human remains scattered among the animal carcasses, some wearing remnants of buckskin clothing, others in cavalry blue, still others in clothing so old it crumbled at a glance. And, at the centre of the chamber, partially buried in bones, something slept. It was larger than what we'd seen in the pasture, much larger. The body stretched 30 feet or more, emaciated but powerful, ribs like ceiling beams, limbs folded in on themselves. The head was massive, skull-like, with antlers that spread across the chamber floor. As we watched, it breathed, and frost formed on the bones around it. "Mother of God," Jack whispered. The thing's eyes opened. I've tried to describe them and failed every time. They weren't animal eyes, they were empty, void-like, as if staring into them meant staring into endless hunger given form. It rose, not quickly, but with terrible inevitability, bones cascading off its body as it unfolded. Standing at full height, it filled the chamber, head brushing the ceiling we couldn't see. "Fire!" I shouted. We threw the torches. They struck the creature's body, and for a moment, impossibly, the flames caught. The thing screamed, that same wind-ice winter sound, and thrashed, knocking 2 men sprawling. But fire needs fuel, and the creature was too lean, too ancient. The flames guttered and died against skin like frozen leather. It came forward. What happened next was chaos. Men firing wildly, the creature sweeping them aside with limbs that moved too fast. Jack went down, then Samuel. I emptied my rifle into its chest, saw the bullets strike, saw them do nothing. Then Peter was beside me with the lamp oil. He'd brought an entire can, saved from the wagon. Without hesitation, he threw it at the creature's face. Oil splashed across the elongated skull, dripped down into the eye sockets. For one frozen moment, nothing happened. Then Peter struck a match and threw it. The creature's head erupted in flames. Real flames this time, burning hot and bright, feeding on the oil. It screamed and retreated, crashing backward into the bone pile, thrashing, trying to extinguish the fire, but only spreading it. "Out!" Jack was on his feet, bleeding but alive. "Everyone out now!" We ran. Behind us, the creature's screams echoed through the cave system, mixed with the roar of spreading fire. The bones were old, dry, perfect fuel. The whole chamber was catching. We burst out of the cave mouth into grey daylight and kept running. Behind us, smoke billowed from the opening, black and thick. The screaming continued for another minute, then stopped. The cave burned for 2 days. We watched from a safe distance as smoke poured from the mountain, as the heat melted snow around the entrance. On the 3rd day, the opening collapsed, sealing whatever remained inside. We lost 4 men in that cave. Samuel, Peter, and 2 others whose names I still see in nightmares. Jack recovered from his injuries, but his left arm never worked properly again. The ranch survived the winter, barely. I sold it in spring of 1887 and moved Catherine to Helena. Told everyone the winters were too hard, the losses too great. That was true enough. The Judith Basin still has ranches. The land is still worked, but if you talk to the old-timers, the ones whose families have been there since the beginning, they'll tell you about the winter of 86-87, about the rancher who lost 40 head in one night, about the cave fire that burned for 2 days. And they'll tell you that in the worst winters, when the cold drops below 40 below and the snow measures in feet, you keep your stock close. You keep your fires burning, you watch the tree line, because some hungers don't die. They just sleep, waiting for the next deep winter, the next desperate cold, the next time when conditions are right and the barriers between the world we know and the older, hungrier world wear thin. I'm 73 now. Catherine passed 5 years ago. Most nights I sleep fine. But sometimes when the temperature drops and the wind sounds like voices, I wake up smelling that sweet rot smell from the cave. And I remember eyes that held nothing but endless winter and endless hunger. They say the Wendigo grows larger the more it consumes. What we burned wasn't that. Only one. Couldn't be. The Blackfeet and Crow had stories spanning centuries. They're still out there, in caves and deep places, sleeping through the warm years, waking when the cold grows deep enough. I just hope the next rancher who finds one is smarter than I was. I hope they listen to the old stories. I hope they keep their fires burning, because some things were here before us, and they'll be here after we're gone.